Hello everyone, we're ready to get started. We've got Alex Quinn here. He's an assistant professor in the School of Engineering and Alex is an assistant professor in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering here at Purdue University. His research focus is in human-computer interaction on the design and study of human computation systems to solve data-intensive problems that machines alone cannot solve adequately. His prior work spans a broad range of domains and topics, including HCI, mobile design, technology for children, readability, tabletop interfaces, museums, information visualization. He has an MS and PhD degrees in computer science from University of Maryland and his bachelor's science in computer science from University of Washington. Today, he will present a talk titled Beating AI at its Own Games with Human Computation. Please welcome Alex Quinn.
Okay. Is this on? Hang on. All right, I think that's, okay, now that sounds more like what I expected. Yeah, so, whoa, that's really loud. So before we talk about the solution, I just want to take a step back. And so when we talk about AI, like what exactly, like why would we want AI in the first place? And it really comes down to work. So it's really since the beginning of time, since people needed to eat, they also needed to work. This is a necessity. But it might surprise you to learn that until about 300 years ago, there really was no such thing as like a job. So, you had individual work and perhaps collaboration, but the idea that we think of really didn't exist yet. But, we had collaboration, so if you had too much work to do, then you could enlist help from friends or family. And from there, probably around the 18th century, we developed the idea of a job, the idea of paying somebody for their time. That's a relatively new idea, and that's an important thing to keep in mind because this is, as you'll hear, this is an idea that is changing, it's evolving. It's not a static thing, this idea that we have called a job. Now, of course, as soon as you could hire people, the question was, could we do better? So we hire people because we don't want to do the work, but we still have to pay for the work. And so if you can automate things, then you can buy something once and you no longer have to pay a unit cost for the work. So, we're going to come back to automation a bit, but when we think of AI really is just a kind of automation. It just happens that AI is automating things that we think of as intelligent, and by intelligent, I don't mean smart, but I mean more like intelligent life, like things that to us we believe would require a human. And so when we say artificial intelligence, what we're really talking about is artificial human. So being able to get the best of both worlds between the delegation and so delegation allows you to do things that maybe that machine couldn't do, and automation, which allows you to do things more efficiently. All right. So you might ask the question, can your job be automated? So I think probably most people's job could be automated to some extent. So just by a show of hands, who here has a job that is very kind of knowledge and judgment intensive? And I should include students here where, if your day-to-day work involves knowledge and judgment. Okay. And does anybody here have a job that is more mechanical than it is kind of human judgment? Okay. So we will get to mechanical work shortly. But when you think of, can my job be automated? If you're talking about machine automation, then really you're talking about these kinds of things that are mechanical in nature, that can be clearly specified, require no initiative, and don't require the idea of humanness. Now, of course, we have artificial intelligence, which is trying to simulate this idea of humanness, and so what we're gonna find is that we're getting narrower and narrower on the things that we consider to be not automatable. So let's just take a special case. So can my job be automated? I was going to pick one of you guys, but I didn't know who was going to be here. So what are the things that I do? So as a faculty member, I grade exams. That's kind of par for the course. This can sometimes be delegated to TAs. But the question is, could this be automated? Could a machine just do this for us completely? So how about that? Yes? No, not reliable. Not reliable. All right, how about this? And I should say that this question mark here, on this particular exam, that is a placeholder for something that you just don't know what's going to be there. And so the question was designed intentionally just a little bit ambiguous, just to avoid giving away the answer. And how about this? So clearly there's a threshold where AI, and when I say AI, I'm encompassing computer vision, image processing, reasoning, and all this. There's a threshold where AI stops being effective. And bear in mind, if we make a mistake, then students are not going to be happy. So this is very, very important to get it right. All right. So, what do people do in the real world when they need to automate, things like this? So, in fact, here in the United States, we have some of the best handwriting recognition in the world, and part of the reason for that is because English has a relatively limited character set compared to some, and the characters are distinct, they don't run together. For a lot of reasons, it works well for English, but we also have a large volume of mail. And so the Postal Service runs into the exact same problem. They would like to be able to run a machine and get all of your letters to go through the machine automatically so that things can be routed as efficiently as possible and your stamp price doesn't go up. But what happens when they get one like this? So turns out they use people in the loops. So when their machine detects that it cannot read where an envelope is supposed to go, they've got an army of people sitting, I'm actually not in Salt Lake City, an army of people sitting in Salt Lake City who do nothing but sit and read the really hard ones. So grandma's handwriting that's kind of like scrawled and it just like basically every letter looks like any other letter. So they're reading these ones and keying in the information the machine wasn't able to get. So together, you've got the image processing. Again, I'm just going to say AI for the sake of simplicity. You've got the AI and you've got a human in the loop that allow you to do perfectly what AI set out to do, but just can't. Now you might ask yourself, is there something inherently about a situation like this that requires a human? So, will AI get there eventually? So maybe or maybe not. So there's this idea of AI completeness. So AI completeness, it's this, and it's not a well-defined set, but it is this idea that if you could solve certain problems in AI, for example, understanding feelings, understanding the true meaning of a sentence rather than just extracting some well-formed facts out of a sentence, and the full range of inference and composition, and what makes sense from a human standpoint. If you could solve one of these things, perhaps you could solve all of them. Certainly in this case, there could be cases where really you would need to know what is reasonable. And that's the thing that machines don't do very well, is know what's reasonable. All right. Let's take another task from my job. So preparing this presentation. So could that, as I prepare a certain number of presentations, could that be automated? So it's actually a question we have been thinking about lately. But you could zero in on just the problem of finding appropriate images. So you may recall in the very beginning of this presentation, I showed you images for work, then for collaboration, for delegation, and automation, and then for AI. And so, I spent a certain amount of time scouring the web looking for images that kind of summed up that concept that would be relatively easy to process, hopefully not offensive. It's surprising the sorts of things that come up when you just put in work, but not kidding. So I spent a fair amount of time doing that, and also making sure that you have images for which you have the authority, the copyright-wise, to put them in a presentation. So at the moment, this doesn't seem to be something that we can automate reliably. And there's also a subjective element. Do these look good? Are they going to be understandable to a human being? So right now I'm not gonna do that exact task, but I'm gonna show you kind of how this can work with a human in the loop. All right, and let's get the duplicate. So, 695. So first I want to show you just a list of a lot of companies that enable you to hire your own army, kind of like the Postal Service has. So it's just a list that I put together a few years ago. These are crowd-powered companies. And all of these companies, should make that a little bit more readable. So all of these companies specialize in the general idea of taking work that you have that you would really wish you could automate and passing it off on to people on the web who you probably don't know, who you probably don't have a regular working relationship with, so that you can get this sense of automating something. So it's not hiring somebody and doing a W-4 and all this, but you're pushing a button and work is getting done that you wished AI could do. So among these, Mechanical Turk is kind of the favorite among academics. So Mechanical Turk, just say, it's a service run by Amazon.com. Amazon originally set out to hire people to help them go through their product catalog. So they were trying to improve their search, understand what it was people were searching for so that they could match that with products, and also just refine their product catalog overall. And they had enough users coming in that they got the idea, hey, maybe we could pay people 10 cents each to look at things. So they have a marketplace. I'll show you what this looks like for the workers. So workers are people who do jobs. Make that bigger. So you come in here, and all of these are jobs for which somebody is looking for help. So here somebody is saying, I don't know if that's readable. Find company information for a credit card charge description. So given a credit card receipt or a credit card statement, find where the actual company is so that they could contact them. Clearly, this is something one might like to automate if you're in a financial type industry. All right. So now I'm going to try to show you exactly how this works from the beginning. Okay. Okay. So they have showing just a moment ago. So they have a website where you can go on, you can specify what you want. This is a very kind of the most user-friendly way to go about this, but you can go on, you can enter the instructions. So I'll show you exactly how that looks. You can enter the instructions of what you want the person to do. You can do it in batches. So if you had a lot of credit card receipts, you could write the instructions once and then upload a set of a set of receipts and have them do kind of the same thing for each receipt. Let's make that readable again. Okay. And this is the kind of thing you enter. So instead of doing the images, images are a little dicey for an audience. We're going to go with YouTube videos. I am willing to trust that YouTube has at least a modicum of moderation. Most workers are pretty good anyway, but you get one person mischievous. So what we're going to do, we're going to search for YouTube videos of boring animals. So it's really easy to find cute YouTube videos. We're going to pay $1. So this is rather high because I'm hoping that we can get some results before I'm done talking. And we're going to give them a maximum of 20 cents to do it. And we're going to got this started. All right, and there we go. The screen is, when it is readable, it is no longer usable. Okay, and there it is, publish. So I'm going to spend perhaps as much as $18 here for your entertainment. We'll see how entertaining it is. All right, so what you see here, this is showing you the progress. So what it's saying right now, and I realize I apologize if this is a little bit small. I can only go so far on that. This is saying we have no progress yet. So my task is actually up on their job board right now. And if we're lucky, we ought to have some results maybe in about 10 minutes. So what's going to happen is the workers who are going to the site, they're going to see in that menu that I showed you a moment ago, where we saw the task for finding information about companies and credit card charges. They're going to see ours among that, and they're going to say, wow, $1 just to search for a YouTube video? You bet. So this is one of the things you can do if you want to get quick results. So I'm going to put that on hold. I'm going to go back to the presentation, and then we will return to that. Okay. So just to be clear, we're using kind of a proxy for this image search task. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to try it. So while that's running, you might ask some questions. Can I trust the worker? So I've already indicated to you that I don't completely trust the worker. I mostly trust the worker. I would not have done this if I thought that the workers were very likely to be dishonest. And part of the reason that I can trust the workers, there's a reputation system there. And although I showed you many different companies, every single one of those companies has some way to ensure accountability of the workers. So in the case of Amazon Mechanical Turk, if I don't like what they've done, then I have unilateral authority to just say, I don't like it, I won't pay, which isn't a super nice thing to do. And if it does that, that actually hurts their record. So that makes it harder for them to get new jobs. Because people can filter and say, I'm not willing to accept workers who have a lot of their work rejected. So now the other thing I wanted to show you is, so we've got a few research projects for each one of these challenges. So in this case, we're also thinking about privacy. So we've just been thinking about if you've got a video that may have some private information, so people's identities that you don't want to disclose, can you get workers to maybe tell you something about the video? Are they hugging or fighting? Is there a knife or a pencil? So there are ways to separate out just the part that you want them to be able to do. So in this case, we let the worker just expose a small part of the video, not enough to expose an entire face, so that they can do just what we want and not be able to tell who is in the video. So can the worker trust me? So as I said, I have authority to reject their work for any reason I choose. And so that's actually a really big problem for workers. So they've actually set up a system where the workers can review me. This is completely separate, external to Amazon, and Amazon does not, they don't really get involved in this. They kind of take a hands-off approach and let people work it out for themselves. But this is called Turk Opticon. It's a browser extension that people can install, and they rate me. So they rate whether I paid well, whether I paid quickly, whether I was reasonable, communicative, etc. And so people take this seriously. This is part of the system of accountability that is necessary to make this work. Now, can you allow them to coordinate? So if you were just doing the job yourself, then you would have complete knowledge of the whole task. And if you're parceling it out to people, you may not. So one little task we've been interested in is maybe instead of just finding one video, can you find 50 videos or perhaps all the videos on YouTube for a certain theme? And if you're doing this by yourself, you're going to remember what you've seen. So we've got kind of a system for allowing workers to kind of pick up where a previous person left off and keep track of what's been seen before. There are a lot of different ways to solve this problem, but dealing with global constraints in crowdsourcing is a challenge for anything where it's not just a series of very small tasks. So we call this relay because they're passing off one part of the job to the next person. Now, can they be creative? So we're really just treating people as almost like robots. So you might ask the question, like can they answer a question that's a little bit that is a little bit creative, that requires them to not just look at an image and tell me, is there a cat? Is this boring? But to be able to come up with something that I didn't give them before. And so in this case, what we're asking them to do is think of interview questions for a job. So people have also asked crowd workers to design products. In fact, this is big business. Ford Motor Company, among many others, has used a company called Incentive that kind of specializes in doing just that, finding product ideas using the crowd. Now you say, well, how much should I pay? So I paid $1. That's assuming it takes them maybe 5 minutes. That's actually pretty good. $24 an hour for just searching on YouTube. So part of the challenge here is that the workers could be anywhere. They could be in India, and in fact, depending on which poll you look at, maybe 40% of the workers are in India, and maybe 40% are in the US, and the remainder elsewhere. So the price scale is going to be different depending on where the workers are, at least the price scale from the worker's standpoint. And yet for us, we have to just advertise one. So this creates a real challenge because we want to make sure that we're not underpaying any worker, and yet we want to be somewhat efficient. So this is a challenge that people have not completely figured out. Also, if you are distributing work, this comes with the same challenges as outsourcing. So you are taking work that you would have otherwise hired somebody here, and you're making it available to someone else, possibly for a much lower price. So that may work well for you, but the people around you may not feel very, very good about that. Countries tend to be possessive about their employment markets. And so this is just an ongoing challenge that has not been solved. And where does this lead? So what does it mean if we take every job? So if we take my job, your job, even say a high school student's job, doing their chores at home, doing their homework, doing whatever other work that they're doing. What does it mean if we automate with machines as much as we can there, and if we take any element of the task that does not require initiative, that doesn't require you to say, this is what I wanted, and therefore it shall be done this way. If we take any part of that and pass it off to either a machine or the cheapest possible labor source, that could lead to a lot less employment in the market in general. So certainly if we automate as much as we possibly can, eventually we're going to run out of needs. So one of the other speakers in a previous year has talked about, eventually perhaps we will meet our needs. We will have crammed enough pixels into our iPhone. We will have just as much fidelity in our audio and in our video games as we wanted. Our food is every bit as good as we ever wanted it to be. And then the question is, if we're automating more and more of that, and if we are using the absolute most efficient way to eke out the part that couldn't be automated, then what? So this is a problem that I don't have a solution for. I would love to have a solution for. Fortunately, we have time. We have how many? Certainly minutes, possibly decades, to solve that one. But certainly, one of the problems that comes is, who controls the market, who controls the automation. So these are problems we're going to have to work through. So I want to take you through. Actually, before I go through this, let's see if we got any work. And clearly taking a risk, putting my fate in these workers' hands. All right, well, nothing yet. All right, well, we'll see. Let's just walk through that, and perhaps we'll have something. Usually get something in about 10 minutes, but it just depends. It depends on who shows up, who happens to be on there, and what else is there. So they are going for the most attractive tasks they can find. So first of all, human computation solves the problems that AI can't solve. So what we do in this area is we are looking at the margin between the things that we actually wanted to be automated and the things that AI can automate. And you say, well, AI is making huge strides, and that's true. That's true. So you have the Google system beating the world champion of Go, and you have Watson, et cetera, et cetera. So we have, they've been making strides a long time before that, but it's been very, very visible. And yet, there's a long way to go. Certainly, to tell if a video is boring, it is certainly not impossible, but it may take a while. And things that require initiative, shared initiative, perhaps may never be automatable. So these are the inherent limitations of AI. So this allows us to delegate work more easily, and that's good and bad. So it's great to be able to, if you're in a hurry, you can pass your work off to someone else if you've got busy work. I can tell you that when I was writing my dissertation back in graduate school and I had 200 references that needed to be reformatted into a completely different system, I hired crowd workers to do that because I felt that $40 of my money was more, I think that's about what it cost, was less important than the time that it would take me, which would probably be quite a bit more than that. So you kind of look at your hourly rate. So it allows you to delegate work more easily. And as I say, this is likely to change the face of labor. So as I said in the beginning, the current state of what we think of as a job is relatively short term, if you think of 300 years as short term. Now granted, I assume none of us were alive at that time, but the Earth was. And there was a lot of work going on before that, and there will be a lot more work after that. So there's a lot of inefficiency in the assignment of tasks and in the way that just people's time is allocated right now. We have the potential to be able to solve that using human computation, but we also know that if we become that much more efficient, again, we may have a smaller labor market, and we'll have to decide as a society how to manage that. I'm going to take one more look. Fingers crossed. All right. Well, they are slower than usual today.
I don't think they like
You know, you've got a point. You've got a point. All right, so I think I'll take questions if anybody has any. Wow.
So this is sort of like Uber?
It is absolutely like Uber, except for digital work. Yes.
That kind of contractual relationship between
Mm-hmm.
the employer and so this kind of gets all sucked up into that argument that they're having between taxi drivers and Uber drivers.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, the question is, were they doing it wrong before? You know, the taxi industry? And are we doing it wrong right now in the way that we do digital work?
Taxis have survived for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever wonder about the accuracy of the results you get from this crowd employees?
Oh, sure, sure. So accuracy is always an issue. Now, bear in mind, in-person workers are not 100% accurate either. So the only real difference here is that with this, here we go, good. With this, these workers are not a known quantity. When you hire somebody, you kind of know their work, and therefore you know what to expect. And maybe they get 1 out of 10 wrong, and perhaps that's okay to you. But you at least know what to expect. With these people, it's just one after another. You never know. You never know who's coming in. There are ways to manage it. So one thing people do is if you're willing to pay a little bit more or underpay them, then you can have 3 people do the same job and then take the average, for example. Or perhaps hire yet a 4th person to look at them and tell you which one is the best. So that gets a little bit inefficient. Another thing that you can do is just build in little checks. So sometimes you may not know how to find the answer, but you may know how to check if the answer is right once you've got it.
So I'm not sure if you're going to show the results or if you want to take another question first.
Yeah, I think I'm going to, there's probably not a lot to say about the results, but I think it's just interesting to, I'm going to have to make this small just briefly so that I can get at the rest of this. All right, and I'm going to click on results. All right, and so this should be a boring rabbit. I don't know if I should blank the screen before I do this, just in case. I think maybe just in case. Okay. Well, I don't know if I consider that boring or not. I'll have to. All right. Well. Yeah. All right. So fortunately, YouTube is protecting us at least a little bit. Let's try another one. All right. No, I think this worker may have been a little less creative than the last one. The first one, I don't know what they searched for to find that. I would assume that they were doing the task in good faith. And a dog. Yeah. The most boring dog is the title of this video. Oh, boy. Right. And note that the instructions specifically said no funny or cute videos allowed. So we'll have to decide.
So my question is, are there any quantifiable numbers around the size of the market, the rate of its growth, and has anyone solved the intellectual property issues? So if you're a business and you want to sort of leverage these types of marketplaces for work inside the company, do you have any risk about the fact that you may have to share some of your IP with those people, and is there any IP ownership issues with that?
Yeah. So those are all great questions. So in terms of the market size, I don't have the exact numbers handy. The largest such organization is called Upwork. They're previously known as Odesk. I'll just show you Upwork. And I have read that Upwork's revenue is north of $1 billion. So Upwork, you're hiring people who are a little bit more known. They have known skills, and so it's really just a matter of freelancing on a somewhat smaller scale. So maybe for a few hours. It is certainly growing, and I think there's no expectation that it's going to slow down, because there is no indication that there's a limit to the demand. Now, the intellectual property issue is a tougher one, but bear in mind, what I'm talking about here is, I've been talking a lot about Amazon Mechanical Turk, because that's kind of a popular one for researchers. It's sort of the most flexible. If you are Microsoft, if you're Google, you're really using the same kinds of methods, except you may have an in-house crowd. So I know that many of these companies work with overseas contractors that have somewhat more controlled crowds. So it's a big building full of people who sit and moderate content, or sit and look at search queries and try to understand what people are searching for. Much of the same stuff that we're talking about here. Once you've reached a certain level of quantity, then you don't necessarily need to rely on the shared crowd, because you know that you're going to have enough need to just have an ongoing relationship with people, and that's probably correlated with people who also have a greater need for privacy and secrecy. But there's also technical methods like the one that I showed you for the videos. And some people have looked at, can you perhaps block out part of the screen, block out the part that you don't want them to see? And that's a relatively fresh area of research, but not one that looks like it's going to slow down, because that's just one of the fundamental obstacles to really realizing the potential here. Yeah.
So, I'm okay without it.
Well, they're recording it.
So given the rapid advances in AI, let's say I'm working on something like maybe it's a year or 2 years out, and I believe there's a gap between what currently can be AI automated versus what might be in 2 years. Do you have any good rules of thumb about what to look for to help me break down the tasks of where I should go out for crowdsourcing, say 2 years out from now, versus what I should try to automate with what I believe AI will be in, say, 2 years?
So I think what you're asking is, if you have a task that you think you might be able to automate with a little bit more work in AI, how do you know whether you should spend the time to develop the code or to do this? So clearly with this, you've got a piece cost. So for every image that somebody looks at, you're having to pay a person to do that. And certainly you can build the system to be as efficient as possible. So it is possible to invest upfront in a system that's going to make people's time as effective as possible. But ultimately, you're always going to have an ongoing cost as long as there are people involved. Whereas with the AI, once you've built the system, in theory, the system will work forever. So I think what I would be looking at is, how long are you going to need to run it? If it's a one-time thing, absolutely use the crowd. If it's something you're going to need to do for 10 years, then I would say use both if you can. So one thing I didn't talk about is certainly you can use crowd workers to make the AI better, and people do this all the time. So the crowd workers provide examples of correct answers that can be used to make the AI be able to predict the answer more accurately than it could before. And there are some systems where you can get the AI to work more actively with the crowd workers. So you've got a machine learning algorithm that only spits out the ones that it is less confident about. And over time, the algorithm just gets better and better. So it's possible really to do both.
Like your postal service example.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my question is about the jobs that AI can't do that are now being taken up by crowdsourced workers or of the sort. Do you believe it's inevitable that AI will do, like in terms of the handwriting stuff you were showing in the beginning, that it will do jobs like those easily, and other jobs it will inevitably get to a point where it's going to take over pretty much all monotonous jobs or such, or even managerial jobs like you were alluding to. and I guess what will happen at that point?
Yeah. So I'm reasonably confident that AI is never going to replace humans completely. And so one reason for that is that we're social animals. So part of the work that we pay for on a day-to-day basis is hiring people to do things where there's a little bit of a social component to it. So, when a certain number of people, I've heard from sociologists, when they go into a bank, part of what they're there for is they just want that interaction with the banker. And so, that's not, so you're never going to recognize the computer as a human or a machine as a human and say, okay, I've scratched that itch for today. So that's one thing. Another thing is it's just the question of initiative. So there are things where, would you pay a person to go do a singing telegram for your mother or your family member? Maybe. There's a human element there. Would you pay a robot to go and play music at your mother's door? Perhaps the most beautiful recording of someone singing happy birthday in the world. Like, probably not, I think. Or tasks that just have some element of initiative. Things where, I wanted it done this way. And if it was somebody else doing it, like that's not what I want. I want to be in control. I think that's the main answer. But then there's also this question of this kind of amorphous set of tasks that I was referring to as AI complete. Will machines ever get really so good at pretending to understand the human experience that we can't tell the difference? I think that remains to be seen. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of this gets into a lot of philosophy.
Do you think they will ever be able to use AI to make a soccer team that can win the World Cup?
Some people do. I'm not going to speak to that contest. I know that there is such a contest, and I'm not knowledgeable about it. I suppose one thing I might add to that is there is a whole branch of this stuff that is interested in real-time decision making. So if I had set things up right, I can actually have workers on call waiting for my task to come in. I'm paying for them to just sit there and watch and wait for something to happen. So in such a situation, it's actually conceivable that you can get people involved in something as fast-paced as a soccer game. Now, do you want them to be manning your goal? Probably not, at least not if they're playing against in-person humans. But it's not completely out of the imagination. There are people who, controlling a robot to move through a space is something that people have done. All right. Anything else? Yeah.
Other than the issues mentioned before with worker reliability, intellectual property, and things like that, are there any other issues that haven't really been mentioned about crowdsourcing large-scale work, such as moderation and identifying videos as boring, exciting, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly, I'm leaving a lot out here. So one big one that I left out is there's just the quality of the experience. So people often ask the question, is this something that I would be comfortable having my children doing? Like, is this the kind of world that I want to be building? Do I want to build a world where every job is just these small, repetitive tasks? That's for a lot of people, I wouldn't say everyone, but for a lot of people, that's considered kind of an unpleasant way to work. I know people who actually much prefer repetitive stuff, and many of them self-select into this. But for the rest of us, myself included, like, you probably wouldn't want all work to be parceled out. Also, there's the issue of attention. So if you're asking people to just go from one thing to another, if you're taking out just the part of the task that you needed the human for, you may be asking people to just change topics, change from looking at one credit card bill to another credit card bill much faster than you would otherwise. These postal workers are just looking at images. They don't even have time to move the envelopes back and forth. And so you're demanding a lot of their attention and of their minds, and that may be an unpleasant thing to do to people. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is just a question, does this is a very top-down process, so we're assuming that, as me, the requester, putting out my job, I get to decide what people will do, and they're like the machine. So some people like to quip, it's like the remote person call, like I just push a button and a person does what I asked for. And not all work works well that way. So, if you've ever tried to collaborate on a team with something that was technically or creatively challenging, you know that the top-down process isn't always the best. So, oftentimes, it pays to have everybody have a stake. So not just be working, but to feel a stake in the success. And if you're parceling out work into very, very small chunks, then none of these workers really feel that they have a stake in whether my presentation goes well today, for example. Whereas, if I had a smaller number of people perhaps in this room, they might feel like, okay, I'm going to feel bad if something weird happens, so I'm not going to put up any really bizarre stuff there. And in the case of creative work, if we're designing a building, you probably want to have people who are going to stick around. They're going to develop the knowledge, and they're going to develop the emotional attachment to the project, which will help them be more engaged and more productive. And so it's not entirely clear that splitting things up this way is the best way to get all work done. But I started off by framing this as problems that AI would like to solve. And so a lot of those things are possibly outside the bounds of what we wanted AI to do in the first place. It's a really good question.
I actually wanted to add to that. For whatever reason, I was reading Upwork before you started your presentation. I have no idea what got me there, but looking at it from the other perspective, exactly what you were touching on, job satisfaction, I think, this probably won't run away to infinity, because some of the feedback that I was seeing was, thank God I'm through the Upwork phase of my life. The workers and the companies started forming other relationships.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't employer-employee, but they were, contracting business, but they went through this just to form those relationships again, and back we are to a more traditional role. But this was a great way to get a ever-flowing, source of workers out there, but they don't seem to want to stick there. I don't think that would be very satisfying to me either.
Yeah, people like to have an ongoing relationship, whether it be with a job or with people, or probably both. Okay. Not sure if are we out of time, or?
I think we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay. All right. Oh, I didn't realize I finished early. I was looking at 2:45 thinking, I got to finish by 2:45 because I had 45 minutes. All right. If there are no other questions. All right. Well, I think we can probably finish early if there are no more questions.